And I'm going to kind of start at the beginning and why I'm kind of shifting gears into the woo. I've been kind of going through it in a way that I couldn't really talk to people about. It doesn't make any sense that even if I use the Opus network, doctors would think I was nuts, right? And that leads me to the whole Scott Andrews thing, the woo, the consciousness connection, and things like that. So that's what I want to kind of get into today. And also, I'm not done with the nuts and bolts. It's just David. Holy shit! I can't describe the last week. I was in some grief that I couldn't understand. It's because I came into this a completely different person, broke, not knowing what I was going to do. Man, this is actually hard for me to talk about. I didn't know where I was going to talk about it. So somehow I found you guys on Twitter, and that's all I can think about is I met the right people in the right places to get me where I needed to go, and it was continuing like that, right? All the way across. So I keep trying to ask myself, how am I here from that position? And I think the whole Scott Andrews story, MK Ultra, all these other things play into it, right? So we're going to start talking a little more woo on my end. I haven't even been completely honest with everybody about the way I interact with the phenomena. I know they know it's been a couple years, 3 years, but I interact with it in ways that don't make sense, that it would make me second guess myself and think I'm crazy. Sometimes I wonder if I'm being CI'd or someone, because things just happen and the synchronicities kind of fall in line. So about 5 minutes, I'll start on the Scott Andrews stuff. We'll start talking about Cosrev mirrors and its connection. So I think it's actually pretty cool because the way it winds around is going to be around like this. Volume 1 is going to be this. We'll move on to volume 2 will be the United States government type program of that, which is like where the space kids come in and MK Ultra and all these other things, right? Project Pegasus. And we'll keep winding our way through to see if we can find Scott by using all this public information. I just think that, man, it's so, all I can say is this. I came into this wanting nuts and bolts, needing nuts and bolts. And then the last week I thought to myself, I don't know if that's enough. I need more answers. I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody else, but I can't begin to explain where I was at and how I made it to. It doesn't matter what happens at this point. I'm in a position that even when things are not going the way they are, I'm confident enough and I know what I'm going to do. And I can't explain that any other way. So it's wild. It's almost a religious view. And I say little G God because I've been feeling it dragging me along, right? So if anybody in here wants to, well, here, hold on a second. If he wants to. So give me about 2 more minutes and we'll start. I just sent out a co-host invite so someone can kind of help me. What we're going to do is I'm just going to start. It's a brief overview of the whole connection, Kozlov mirror, all these other things and all the things that happened. And then we can all open up for discussion, anything along those lines, because it does involve UFOs. It does involve nuts and bolts, right? So nuts and bolts, consciousness, all this stuff's intertwined. We're going to figure out how. What's up there, Psycho Nora? So give it about 2 more minutes. Hey, do me a favor, though, retweet this so everybody can see that I've gone nuts and we all woo. That'd be kind of cool. Welcome, everybody. We're about to get started here in a sec. Just retweet. Let me find the right script. All right. Dude, I've got so many. That's all I've been working on is this woo shit. I got so many scripts, and woo can get you anywhere. I can tell you what, the rabbit holes get deep. So let me find it. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry. I should be more organized, but All right. All right. Nikolai Kozrev was a Russian astrophysicist who's best known for his research on stars and theories of time. He believed time was not just a measurement, but a source of energy that could be harnessed and manipulated. This led him to develop a concept of time energy or torsion fields, which he believed could be focused specifically with constructed mirrors known as Kozrev mirrors. The mirrors are typically constructed as spiral aluminum cylinders. They're designed as on Kozrev's theories of focusing and manipulating time energy or torsion fields. These mirrors are believed to create a unique environment that can lead to various physical and psychological experiences. That there is important: physical and psychological. There are instances where these mirrors are being used where individuals that are using these mirrors are able to, I say not manufacture, bring things into existence that weren't before. And I'm not just talking about in their mind. Other people were able to see them in the facilities. And this is all documented in the actual, there's a book, which I posted in a link, I think, somewhere down there, right? It's all documented in there and they talk about it. But one of the things that's really, I guess you would say, important to remember here is this. As they're doing these experiments in the town, which is up in the Arctic, they're also having at the same time UFO experiences just popping off as they continue to do the experiment, like they're looking for something. Now, in layman's terms, what I think is going on, what I perceive is going on, this is just somehow it's basically access to the Akashic record, right? So imagine being able to communicate, and they do. They communicate with what they call tall, white, faceless, I think is what some of them describe it, and they're there. So these individuals, they use these things and it heightens these abilities, right? They're able to remote view. They're able to travel in time. Now, what's that mean? Okay, we got to stop thinking about time as being a physical thing that we can physically move through when it's actually probably way easier, right? It's perception. Time's always there from the beginning to end, forward, backwards. Our minds construct the flow of time for us. In a 5D view of this, it'd be access to everything all at once, all information you could just see, know, and all this stuff, right? So if we perceive time this way, these individuals were time traveling. They were able to go back and forth to events, and there's some documentation on these different things and all that that's going on through this whole process, right? So this kind of opened my eyes, and I actually did some more research, right, after I was reading on this stuff, because in my head it's like, if it's perception, and so I started looking up some other things. And one of the reason I really dove headfirst into this, I always talk about my super bad deja vu, right? Like that's what I follow a lot of times. Like, man, I've heard this somewhere. Let me see what this is, or along those lines. And that would make sense to me. We also can think of it as this way too. Trauma is a form of time travel. Just like when you have a good experience, it goes quickly. Trauma, you grab more detail. So when you're having a traumatic experience, flashbacks could actually be a form of time travel. The reason you're feeling and hearing and seeing all these things, right? It's in our head. So once you have access, which is super important, once you have access to these, say, the Kozrev mirrors, and you're using these, you can actually take away some of these gifts. So these individuals are being used to, I guess, do different psi things, right? And they're learning quite a bit from them. They're seeing that it's real. They're also seeing that there's access to something they don't quite understand. These individuals are able to see symbols. The symbols remind them of Sumerian symbols, which again brings us back to the Akashic record. This is what I'm saying. I think it is, right? It's some electric rail to consciousness that we're all connected to without knowing it. And once you learn how to hack it, you can do these different things, time travel, manipulate things. You can change events. Bear with me. So they talk about being able to go back and forth and being able to alter the way things are, right? There's also a saying now, right? Fake it till you make it. That's what that is. So using the Kozrev mirrors, what we take is this. Everything we perceive is real, all of it, all the time, is all happening right now. We have the innate ability to see it. We just don't know how. So one of the things that I also know as a veteran is this: the United States government's not going to let Russia do some stuff and get some results and not try to do that same stuff and get better results. So that mirror program was the start of what we would perceive as time travel. When I was talking about, I guess in some spaces, I'd talk about shitty versions of time travel and things like that. Shouldn't say that. I didn't necessarily understand it. And most people aren't going to. And this is where I think the story of Scott Andrews starts. I think once this was developed, the United States developed their own program, Project Pegasus, maybe Montauk, whatever you want to call it, right? And because one of the things they learned in Russia is children are fantastic at this. So we also take a step further, and we can go into MK Ultra and John Lucas. And I don't want to venture too far in this because this is like volume 2, but he did a great, just literally article on this psychic spy kids, all this stuff, space kids. That's a legit thing. Gordon Cooper talks about those. And MK Ultra, one of the things they do is they use trauma to break individuals down so that they're more susceptible to these things. And I wonder this: if these individuals were able to take things away, let's say they're no longer in the program. I imagine brains, they're having some kind of a brainwashing going on, right? So they can't remember. They still have gifts, and they're still being followed, tailed by the government and their new friends, the Greys, or whatever you want to call them. So once you use this, and the reason this just seems so for me, I got the attention of whatever I've been interacting with, right? And once you do, it's like they're there. So I kind of feel some of this. So these guys, they leave the mirrors, the women, children, whatever, and they continue to have experiences. But in the United States, these experiences continue with both the United States government tailing them, and you have I guess you'd say their sessions to Greys. Because if you read the actual, I think the article, Simon & Schuster article, it talks about he was a space communications specialist, I think is what it was. And you've heard that we've been communicating with them, right? Well, this is one of the methods. So as hard as this is to believe, go back to Lou Elizondo's quote on this whole subject. It's going to blow. I think that Scott Andrews book is the blueprint to the woo, just like Secret Machines was for the nuts and bolts. Do you follow me? That's what's important to remember. I think it's a blueprint for all of this. Go ahead, Ty. And I see I've been talking for a minute. If you want to say something.
No, it's just an interesting correlation. I think this Scott Andrews case. So is that I kind of missed the beginning. So you've been searching for this person, or have you been searching for the story?
Oh, I've been searching for him because here's the thing. There's not a place. Okay, this is so wild. Do I go here? Look, there's not a lot of places to go if you got really, really woo questions.
No, not a lot.
If you're trying to, if you're trying to figure out, let's say, I've talked about these before in different spaces, right? Downloads. So a download, and I'll have to post later on where I got some of this different information, but it makes sense. Often we see hoaxes, like how they're trying to communicate with us. If this species, if whatever this is here, they're just going to drop shit in our head. They're not going to put dots and shit on paper and big fucking map for us to try to figure out, right? It's a download. And a download's just a mnemonic, I think it was a mnemonic communication device. So when they put it there, it's not a matter of you get the question, then you got to figure the answer. That download, once it's in your head, is you got the question, you got the answer, you got all that knowledge that you need at that same time. Do you follow me on that? So now I'm further enough along, too, that at the very beginning, I didn't understand this. I went crazy after my experience started, obsessed with platinum, palladium, all these things. And now I'm far enough along, I know I do have all that stuff. But I have no way of knowing how I knew to bring home rocks. take off 100,000 years worth of rock off of them before I could see that it was that, right? But I did, and it makes no sense to me. So that's why the searching for Scott Andrews, just kind of a, I guess, a play on words, right? Just trying to find people to ask the right questions, because we now got nuts and bolts coming out,
right?
So we can ask more questions. But who do you go to ask these kind of questions, side questions, any of this stuff that we now know is real? Hell, David talks about some of this stuff a little bit, right? How deep and dark the rabbit hole is.
Right.
Hey, you want to bring them up, Ty? I think there's a couple people requesting.
Yeah.
I can't even see him on my thing. Twitter's messing up, so I can't bring them up.
I got them.
All right, cool.
But I think it's interesting with what David Grush is saying. You can see now, if anyone's analyzed, really looked at him, you look at that guy and you say he's holding back something else. Like, he's holding back more than he's giving up. And I find it really interesting because, this Scott Andrews story, it's been rumored for a while, and just, Lou Elizondo backed it and everything. And I imagine a world where they have to disclose, not only they're going to roll out this crash retrieval program, hopefully, and say, yeah, we've been, a part of this. Sorry, it's national security. But when are we going to get to ask these questions? Like you said, the woo questions, the more abduction related, those kind of questions. Is there going to be forums held for those types of people to get vindicated, after being told that they were crazy for years and years? And
good question,
it goes even deeper with this Scott Andrews. Imagine there's because kids, like we talked about the aerial school, right? And how kids may be more susceptible to these contact experiences. So, if kids are involved, there are a lot of people going to be upset. Like, if we keep tugging on this string, is the information we find going to be information we want?
Well, that's the thing. Let me put it this way before we get over Chrissy real quick, and then after Chrissy, I'll move back on. So I have to make a choice every time I start talking about this stuff. When I first started talking about my experience, I didn't even know Yakima Valley was a thing. But I had to be like, all right, I'm going to put my name and face to this because it's real, it's messing my life up, and it's everywhere I go all the time. I even still held back, which I still do, because, again, that's why I'm doing this stuff, right? I can't even go. This sucks, man. I probably couldn't even go to an Opus Network doctor who works on this kind of stuff and tell them my full story without them thinking I was crazy. None of it makes sense to me, man. So the woo's here. It literally feels like I've been dragged from spot to spot to meet people. I got literally everything I needed out of life that I missed out on from this subject, but I still feel like it's fucking with me. Does that make any sense? It gives me things, and I say, God, I sound so fucking batshit crazy. Things keep getting put in front of me, and I'll piece things together. Maybe I'm good at them, stuff like that. That people be like, that dude's crazy as shit. There's no way he knows that. It's like, are you kidding me? It's always things. It's like, same thing with the platinum and stuff. Ask me how hard it's still sitting mostly in rock form. It's almost like test after test. Makes no sense outside of maybe if you're Gnostic.
Well, so really quick before Chrissy jumps in. So we've heard this before. Is it really up to humans to disclose the presence, or does this NHI, are they the ones holding the cards and holding the secrecy above all else? And maybe they have implemented a plan to give to certain people, to not touch, I guess that sounds a little weird, but to ascertain information to a select few, or even, a large number when you go global, to kind of get them to start spreading the message. And for this, we look at over the past 25 years, the stigma has kind of slowly faded away. Could that have been a plan implemented years and years ago? We don't know. Like, these are all still questions, and the answers are much to speculate about. And I don't think any one of the answers is off the table yet.
We'll get to Chrissy real quick, and then I'm going to continue on. I want to actually answer to that too. Go ahead, Chrissy.
Hey Shane, I just wanted to back up what you were saying about downloads. Yeah, you know I've gotten downloads, and so I'm just here to say that what Shane is saying is true. There are people having communications with something, and they seem like downloads at times because I think there's more information that I get from it that I can express humanly with words. So I just wanted to say I'm in your corner there, Shane. I'm behind you 100%.
Can
All
I
right,
ask a
cool.
question?
Go ahead, Ty.
So what does it feel like to get a download? Like, no, what is this for the average person who maybe doesn't understand it? What does a download feel like? What
I didn't feel anything. I mean,
I know,
here's
but
how
how
it
does the
works, man.
information?
I thought I was all it was this was I I remember I was in near Mount Rainier. I just had an experience, and then I was out by the river, and I looked down. I'm like, oh shit, look at all that gold, and these things here are definitely nuggets of some kind. And then in my head, I kept thinking maybe platinum, stuff like that, right? And it's just I just knew. I didn't know how I knew. That's what confused me. And everyone around me is like, oh, there's no way. And now it's like, okay, now I got to figure out where to take it to get it taken care of because it's a whole chemical process, platinum. And like that's what I was saying, putting shit in front of me that it's like, are you for real, man? Give me some easy shit here. And I say this stuff and people, what's hard for me is I get that people have experiences. It's isolating as fuck to know that my experience is so vastly different. If I really talk about it, I can get medication. People, I lose friends, shit like that.
Yeah.
I, I've been saying for a minute, I'm going to say it here too. I've been jokingly calling it. People want to know how I got to where I'm at doing this shit. I just follow hunches, man. I call them my Peter Tingles. I follow fucking hunches after hunch after hunch.
I like your Spider-Man reference.
Yeah, you like that? But
I do.
That's how we got. I just know. So the other day, here's an example of my Peter Tingle. I see 4 links. I grab just randomly the second link. It's a video. Hit the button to scroll forward. And just scroll forward to a point, stop, and Yakima. It's a video from a UFO in Yakima Valley. And I'm like, what the fuck? Things like that happen so frequently. And I don't know, because we talk about like when your experiences happen, like you kind of opened your eyes to things. But to be sitting there and pieces of information that you were missing out on a puzzle from some of the things that I post about and I piece things together, or I'll run through sources and things like that. You know how batshit crazy I probably sound to get a piece of information and have to ask myself, dude, did somebody put that dude up to telling me that? Because I needed to hear that just for that. Or did some, and I start second guessing everything. Like this gets wild. And it's in a spot that this is also why I was doing UAP Med. I'm taking a little break just because, again, the phenomenon and life have all been coming hard at me. Just trying to make sense. Sorry. But I'm telling you, it's one of the wildest, most cathartic fucking experiences I've ever had. I spent the last 5 days just grieving, not my life and shit like that, I almost felt like it was over. I was like, holy fuck, I'm human.
Well, I think
what happened?
Yeah, I even got a couple DMs about where you were, and I just said he's taking some time to himself. And
yeah, dude, and that's what it was. It's literally, how do I explain to people? God, this sucks, man. I was going to do a podcast and shit. I cry every time I talk about it because it's not bad tears. And I've spent my life missing out on everything, right? I can't figure out how I'm here, the confidence I have, the things I do. I owe people. I don't have an ordinary life, man. To owe people my life that are anonymous sources, some of the closest people I try, what the fuck, man? And then on top of that, to go all the way around, and remember, I'm not a big UFO guy at the beginning, to find out where I'm at is known for what I've been experiencing. And from it's continuous, right? And it just keeps going. And I keep thinking to myself, man, I owe you guys my life. And that's not even a fucking joke. How fucked up. I'm not going to say it's fucked up. At first, I viewed it as being messed up. I would think of it this way. How is this my life? Now I keep thinking about it like, damn, can't even believe that was my life. That's insane. And it's hard. It sucks, some of it. But it opened my eyes to, man, there's something a lot deeper than nuts and bolts. I'm missing something. So that's why I'm searching for Scott Andrews, right? And by that, I mean all those individuals that have experienced, because again, our government, not only nuts and bolts, MK Ultra, we know that's a thing. So I wanted to say, I think it was earlier I was trying to think about, if you were communicating, because we're talking about downloads, let's say if a Gray was to communicate with you or something like that, because you were in these programs and they kept communicating with you, and the government knows that you can communicate with these beings. Wouldn't they monitor you? What if these beings gave you information that you weren't supposed to have? That's where I think the Havana syndrome comes in for him. But that's just a guess on my thing, right? So, hey, guys, if you guys want, do me a favor, retweet this. If you want to come up here and talk about anything, I'm going to open it up to anybody about anything in here. If you heard something profound, or if you've had an experience that makes you think, all right, wait, okay, what's going on here? Does this make any sense? You know, you're cool, it's safe in here, because again, I can promise you, I can tell you things that don't make any sense, to the point that if I tell people, a lot of times they think I'm batshit crazy. So what's up, Christian? What do you got?
Yeah.
Yeah, this topic's it's very difficult not to sound insane when you go down this rabbit hole. But like Gary Nolan said, the clue is only around the corner. And no matter how you slice this phenomena, it's gonna end up in weird and woo. There's just no. That's where it's gonna go, And it's really hard for people to accept that, because things get weirder and weirder and weirder and weirder, and they just keep getting weirder. Right, so I don't know, man. It's almost like I gotta keep myself grounded, because I don't want to go insane. It's easy to lose your mind if you're not careful with this topic. And because at the end of the day, I gotta go to work. I gotta pay my bills. I got a family. You know what I mean? So I gotta stay. I love this. It's fascinating. But I gotta stay grounded, because I live in this reality too. That's just me. But I do think that it's all real. The woo, all that, yes. The question is do you think the phenomena is increasing? Because 2 days ago, it was 3 a.m, I was smoking a cigarette, and I was looking up, and it was insane. And I was kind of frustrated, because everything was so far away that I couldn't take a video of it. But it was insane. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? Is the phenomena increasing to a point that that's why the government is forced to talk about it? Besides, obviously, Lou and all these people that have been pushing for it, but it seems like it's normal now. All you got to do is look up on a clear night, and you'll see something.
Well, it's funny that.
So is it? Yeah.
No, it's funny that you mentioned that, because, a theory of mine that I've long held close is that they know something's on its way, or something is, they have because like places like SETI and stuff like that. I mean, if they, or astronomer, like Avi Loeb, if they were to see something like a Muamua, like let's say that, or an actual ship that was coming this way, I mean, they could get a target estimate of an arrival date. So are they on some sort of timeline like that? Or, I mean, for the people who have more up close and personal interactions, that already have that knowledge that it's already here, for them, are they holding the secrecy? Is this non-human intelligence holding the secrecy and rolling it out slowly into the public, as well as the government, using the government as a tool?
Oh, no, they're not using the government. They don't need the government. They're using us. Experiencers, whatever you want to call it. People who they communicate with, they want disclosure. Now, let's not kid ourselves here. There's not just good guys out there. It do you probably a good service to brush up on Gnosticism. And I don't mean it's that exactly. There's good and bad. And David speaks to that. That's why we have a takedown program, which still can't that's part of how the hell did I get to where I was on some of that, right? I think it's all of this that's combined. And I think that trauma for me is how that's the only thing I can explain. I can also say it makes me laugh because it feels honestly like no shit. I'm being dragged by this shit towards disclosure, by whatever's going on. And I see people who are trying to help force disclosure within the government, right? In my head, just like, oh, this dude and his baggage, keep that shit clear, right? And whatever I was interacting with wanted none of that. We were just failing. That's why we kept saying we're failing up, right? We kept getting the goods going on and on and on. And it just kept making me laugh thinking about, oh shit, everybody's like, oh, this dude, keep him away. They're going to think this shit's crazy. NHI wasn't having none of that. They wanted my crazy ass involved. That shit just makes me smile thinking about that stupid shit.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to still. I think there's a lot to be learned still. So much of it, and I think there's parts that we're gonna like. There's parts we're not gonna like. But each of us as an individual will have to sit down at our desk, at our table, at our place of work, at this or that, wherever you are. Sit down with your family at the dinner table, and eventually you're gonna have the conversation about what your place in the universe is. When this stuff starts to come out, I know Richard Doty, as much as people don't like him, he's been talking about how there's David Grush's boss is about to come forward, and then a separate admiral from the Navy, completely separate, backing up claims by David Grush. So an admiral, a one-star admiral in the Navy, or its equivalent, like a general. I'm not sure how the ranks
I know
work.
who it is.
Yeah. So that person's about to come out. So like when this stuff really does hit the fan.
Oh yeah, that's why I've been telling you guys, Ty. Look,
yeah.
I know no one wanted to believe my ass. Ty told me the other day, he's like, man, you've been giving the goods for a long time.
Yeah.
I've been telling you guys for a minute. Like, David's not the only one. He just brought he broke the dam.
Yeah, you told me not. So you've given me nothing but good information. That's why in Shane, I trust.
My alien overlords have been protecting me. I can't help it, right? I don't look. I say that jokingly a lot of times, but I sometimes wonder how much of that do I actually mean? And because again, and it goes back, nuts and bolts in this is intertwined in a way you can't understand. For me, the phenomenon is such that all day, every day, as I'm going around my day, I have to ask myself, how? Why? Probably the existential questions that I should have been asking a long time ago, right? But I've so hung up on other stuff. Now I understand there is, I guess you could say that it's pretty lonely being an atheist in a way. And I'm not saying this is God, but what I'm saying is to not understand or know there's something else, man, this opens doors. This opens that sense of wonder. All of a sudden I became this investigator, doing all these different things and one after the other, meeting people, family, friends, things like that. People that I needed to get through things because my life's been tough. I was cleaning my shit up and none of this, I didn't ask for any of this. I hope people would know that the last thing I want to talk about and be a part of would probably be this. Actually, I'm probably on the negative right now because of it. Money, friends, family, all that kind of shit. But I continue going because what do? There's other people that are getting fucked up out there just like me. To know that I'll probably never get to sit down in front of somebody face to face that has the same fucked up experience just to say, hey, man, this happened. Without being judged. It sucks, dude. To not be able to talk about all my interactions because I know, hell, you guys are thinking this dude's a lunatic, just sounding like he's crying over it. Nah, dude. I can only imagine people like Jim Simney Van or at points feel like, what the fuck is going on? That's how I feel sometimes. And I have zero clue where to go, what to do about it. But here I am. And I'm thankful because I wouldn't have made it through any of this if it was not for these spaces. That's why I keep coming back here. When I'm lonely and I'm hurting, I come back here because there's other people in these rooms that have dealt with some of it. And this is where I get most of my answers, if not all. Actually, almost all my answers. You fucking lunatics. What's up there, Andy?
Hey, Shane, it's good to have you fucking back, man. I was stoked to see you doing a space today. I heard you bring up the metallic spheres, and so this is one thing that I saw on John Majorowski's channel a couple of years ago. Patrick Jackson was on there. I think it was a couple of years back, but so the whole idea that he had of these things being a planetary defense network in order to take down some of these ships that come in. And then there's also, if you look into it, there's good evidence that these things have been around since biblical times. So I'm wondering if you got any inside info. What have you heard about the spheres? Was Ball Jackson right or what, Shane?
The spheres, I'm going to tell you this. I think, educated guess, 98% of whatever we deal with is some kind of AI. Okay? The rest of it, maybe it's the tall white, some shit, the good, the bad, the shit that we're dealing with, right? That's what I think's going on there. So an advanced civilization obviously is going to have some worker bees or whatever. And I think that's what the vast majority of what's going on. Now, you had made a comment just now, interplanetary defense. I keep thinking in my head too, down in the Antarctic. What is it? It's called the ice cube. The detects oh man. I'll think of it in a second, right? Eric Hecker talks about it. Pay attention to that. That has something to do with our story later on too, as well, right? So the advanced energy weapons, some Tesla stuff, the Tesla mirrors, right? So all these things have to do with it. I keep coming back here, man, because again, I get most of my neutrinos. There it is. Thank you. I appreciate that event. So neutrinos is what I was looking for. And I think it's something different because he talks about an energy weapon. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever got the chance. So this is a true story as well. Had no clue about this. This happened in this order too. Had no clue that in Russia, was it the Tunguska incident, right? Was maybe possibly, it's been considered as, conspiracy wise, whatever you want to call this. I'm not going to say necessarily conspiracy, some kind of an energy weapon of Tesla's. It was a mistake to do that, right? I had actually, without ever knowing that, I'd asked somebody, maybe that wasn't a meteor. Maybe it was, and I thought it was our energy weapon, like that we take whatever craft down with. Now, here's how I'm piecing it together. Now, listen. I thought maybe it's one of our energy weapons. That's how we taken them down and all that. And then later on, I find out that Hecker says that we use this place, right, to track and all this other stuff, right? Sorry, I was reading something. Go read it in event, posted it. I'll put it up in the nest, actually, I think. And here I am, and I asked somebody, I said, man, I wonder if it seems like maybe that was, and then my source was like, oh, yeah, I've heard that too, blah, blah, blah. So I went and looked and watched a video about the whole thing. And I'm like, what the? I had no clue about it. Just popped in my head that might be that. Now, that brings me to that ice cube facility, a place to track it, maybe some kind of advanced energy type. And this is where it's going to get really wild. So you had mentioned spheres, and this pops into my head, right? So the Keslev mirrors, I always pronounce that name wrong. I'm sorry, I got to bring Puddle up. I can't even bring him up. Hey, can you get her up, please? I can't see anybody for some reason. So if those mirrors are basically made out of polished aluminum in a specific way to harness time. Okay. And when you're in the Arctic, Antarctic, apparently permafrost holds more time. So they're able to get more. That brings us back to the ice cube facility, there, right? I also, if you go back and read, Secret Machines, McMurdo Station, there's a reason all of this is kind of existing and one into the other. Now, if you're able to, I guess you'd say, if the government program here in the United States was able to have one of these, where would they have it at? There's only a couple places. It has to be Alaska and the South Pole.
Yeah, and didn't they just talk about? So I know not everyone's a fan of Dr. Greer, but with his event at the NPC, there was that gentleman who spoke about the base in the Arctic that was beaming. That when they turned it on, apparently
that's it right there. That's Ice Cube facility.
It triggered like earthquakes and tsunamis, and they've been since beaming like faster than light messages, or it might be a defense weapon. Who knows? Like you can only go with the information you've been presented, and they only really had like 5 or 6 minutes to present. So I think more on that later. But why is the Antarctic so heavily guarded if it's the one place that is kind of like a free zone?
Operation
right?
High Jump. I'm
right,
not
exactly.
high jump. Was it high jump or paperclip?
It was
No, it was high jump.
High jump. So paperclip was one to bring the Nazis here, but then high jump was to intercept whatever the Nazis were trying to grab.
What if Bird went on down there and he took all that shit, the bell, everything, right? Now, again, I would start paying attention, go out there and research Spartan 1 and 2. Because I think I still got to do a little more on this, right? But I think this plays into it somewhere, is what I'm trying to say. But so we got these facilities now. We know time travels perception. We can access it. The government is using MK Ultra, some variation, to, I guess you would say, do this to children specifically, which is where I think Scott Andrews fits into the whole picture. So he's not even aware of it until later on that he was a part of this program. But then something brings it all back, and he's able, because again, he let's say he has encounters with what he was encountering before, because they don't ever stop. So what's our government going to do there? And where did we get the Havana syndrome weapon? What's that, Ty? You know what Havana syndrome is?
Yeah, and I think Gary Nolan's research into that is proof in itself that the Havana syndrome is definitely linked to the phenomenon in some sort of capacity. And I'm not I don't know everything about Havana syndrome, but from what I've heard, I had Carl Crusher on the podcast. It just went up today, and he was talking about how the ranches, both owned by Bigelow, Mount Wilson, and Skinwalker, and both sets of the NIDS teams were there and seen at both ranches. Could they have been working on some sort of energy direction weapon? All these questions start to get raised, and it's really, really fascinating to me. And I really want to know like where Scott Andrews fits into all this. And I know that's a pseudonym, but whoever this person is.
Hey, I'll say this as well. One of the things that blows my mind after the fact as well, too, is like I just mentioned I guess you'd say the minerals and stuff that I got obsessed with, right? So back in I just actually read something that, man, I'm going to mess this up. What are they called? I'm going to say, well, whenever the original beings had come here, it was when we were developed as a hybrid of them. So again, there's the whole Adam and Eve take rib, right? It was here for gold and stuff like that. And you also can go to, in Colorado, they used to say, hey, mark the spot where you see a UFO, because there's going to be, you can always find metals there. I ended up traveling to this is part of the woo. None of it makes sense. This is when it started. I went to Vernal, Utah. My very first night in Vernal, I had my first dream I've had in 5 years, and I was abducted by Grays. I was like, what? It fucked me up. It was a bad dream, right? Dream. I went there because of Blind Frog Ranch, because they were looking for minerals there, right? And I'm like, oh, maybe it has something to do, well, whatever. While I was there, I ended up meeting people, talking to people, and
I don't want to overshadow you here, but Blind Frog Ranch is something that I did ask about last night. So I've heard to the contrary that Blind Frog is not as paranormal as some people think it is. Is that what are your thoughts on that? I quickly, I know you.
All I can tell you is this, bro. Blind Frog is like 15 fucking minutes from Skinwalker.
Okay.
So if you want to say that only this area at Skinwalker's paranormal, I don't know about that because that doesn't make any sense. And I'll also say that Charlie Boy buried my patch and my picture underneath the portal at Blind Frog, my very first UFO conference when this all started, and all hell broke loose after that. No shit. I've got the photos. I mean, I texted him back in the day and stuff, and like he sent me, he buried it under there, and all hell broke loose. And I'm not saying it's not. What I'm saying is Vernal, Utah, just like Yakima Valley, because Yakima Valley is not contained to one spot. And I doubt Skinwalker Ranch is that, right? It may be just a area that it happens because they talk about that entire area with all kinds of things, right? That's just the spot he owns. I think it has something to do with shit. It's probably all just like what Spartan 1 and 2 talks about, these something buried that's maybe possibly a previous civilization that again starts where the Akashic record, where all this starts. So this gets a little woo, and we start talking about things like them making a slave race out of us to do things for them. A great flood coming, they bounce with gold and shit, which is why they came, and the survivors turned into us, worshiping gods, basing them on what? This sounds wild, guys, but this is where we're going. I'll use the word the kids say all the time, bet. What's up, Christian?
Yo, so about Havana syndrome, I'm curious what you guys think, because I've heard a few whispers. I've heard whispers of people that have been briefed on UAP getting Havana syndrome. I've heard whispers of people working on classified technology in some aerospace getting Havana syndrome. I have no idea how true this is, but I'm very interested in who the hell is getting Havana syndrome. What were they working on at the time? And is it the phenomena, or is it a secret group in the United States government that is doing this? What do you think?
Here's what I got. Sorry about that, Ty. 1 second. Here's what I got, man. So I'll give you part of this question. I heard from a source one time that the whole Kit Green thing, where he's discussing individuals that have passed away and all, the government tries to shade it as, ew, it's because of something entirely different. No, a lot of the individuals were experiencers, right? And anyone that had worked within these programs around these materials, something was happening along these lines, like getting them sick. Or does that answer your question at all? That's all that I know, is that the government the Kit Green comments about people dying because of the phenomenon and all that, the government shaded it one way when it's actually people in these programs, just from trying to reverse engineer interacting with it, we're getting these symptoms and dying from it and stuff like that. Doesn't mean all of Havana syndrome is because of that, but that brings us to an important point. To think that our government would only reverse engineer tech for war is crazy. If they knew getting near this radiation or what was doing things to people, and they'd figure out a way to focus that shit right into a Havana. Hey,
Yeah,
take over real quick, Ty. I'll be back in 2 minutes.
Yeah, the Havana syndrome is very, very interesting, and I think Tom could lend some credence to it, to the knowledge, or not the knowledge of it, but what we know about it is it's mostly these people that are working in the field, U.S. Operatives who may or may not have come into contact with the phenomenon that come down with these really bizarre symptoms. And Gary Nolan, that's when Gary Nolan was first contacted by the government, because he and his work on cancer and his research into pathology and disease and all of it. That's why he was brought in. I mean, he's the leading expert on that kind of stuff. And the guy's got 17 patents, like 15 companies. They brought the best and brightest in, and now he's a huge advocate for the subject. There's a correlation there. And so Havana syndrome is, we may not know a lot about it yet, but we're on the precipice of knowing more. And I think Gary Nolan's the best person to be working on that said field.
I'm back.
Yeah, and it goes way back. He said it didn't start in Cuba in 2016. Gary Nolan said it goes way back, but that's the first official case.
Well, I'm sure it does.
Hey, you want to know what's crazy?
You could even consider the Rendlesham Forest incident and what happened to those guys, potentially part of the Havana syndrome.
You mentioned Gary.
Yes.
Back in the day when my experience first started, he's the only one I'll say the name of. But I contacted 4 or 5 people that are big names, right? And dumped a lot of my experience. I regretted it afterwards because I thought how batshit crazy it sounds. Now I don't. It's all on point. And I'm like, what the hell? So I've got literally documented shit of me dumping shit, right? That I didn't understand because it was just happening. And then later on, it's like, oh, what the hell? How did I even? Go ahead, Tom.
Hey, what's up, guys? I saw you guys were in here, and I'm just kind of like working on stuff. I just got home from doing some things. So I guess this would kind of connect to everything you guys are talking about. Plus, we had Carl, the Crusher, with us last night, which was a real pleasure, but it got me really thinking about
that's
some
where
things.
I knew you got that blind frog comment.
Yeah.
I knew it.
Yeah,
as
for
soon
sure.
as he said, I like Carl. I've met him.
Night.
He's a good guy. Actually, I met him in Vernal my first time.
But
yeah.
he wouldn't even answer the question. I deduced from his answer that
right, yeah.
Well, here's the thing.
He's probably under some sort of NDA.
I don't want to go in there on that, but what I'll say is this. I know that both those, even though they're one's on a different, it doesn't matter. They're both kind of fighting each other over like rights because someone stole a Skinwalker Ranch. It's one of these things. It's a business thing. I wouldn't let that shade the phenomena. That's just like, sometimes reporters get disinfoed, and guess what? There's not many of us. So you're going to get the goods, but you're going to get the shit. So pay attention to the story, use your filters, vet the stuff. That's what I recommend. Now, I'm not saying, hell, I'll tell you what, I've heard the same thing about Skinwalker. 100%. I've heard Skinwalker Ranch is actually nothing to do with the phenomenon. From actually important individuals. Doesn't mean that's the thing, because I've heard the opposite from others. It's just, you've got to start weighing some of it, right? Because again, when I speak about this hotspot that I'm at, it's Yakima Valley. It's a monstrous area. I just have a lot of trouble thinking that it's going to be contained to a ranch. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Definitely. There's no reason.
And Carl's the bomb, by the way. I love the dude. I met him my first time in Vernal.
Really nice guy. Really, I personally resonated with him because we're both spiritual people, and there were some things that he was saying that I really felt. But it drew me back into some things. And again, not everybody's a big fan of this particular individual, but I keep finding myself going back to things that he said. Tom DeLonge, when he's spoken about things like beings that have posed as gods, and they provided the religious messages from the heavens. Just like, I think he had even said something along the lines of like all the Greek and Roman gods, like that's all true. All those stories are real. I keep going back to that. And then I apply Vallee's idea of this control system. And I'm like, if you look at what religions have done. And again, I don't mean to offend anybody either by saying this, but if you take all the negatives that religions have created, let's just be blunt and transparent about those things. We're down here fighting, right? We're all like, the Muslims don't like the Christians because they do this and so forth. While we're down here doing that, occupied by those differences in ideologies, we're not looking up. We're just down here doing our thing, and that just feels like such a massive distraction. And that and even Gary, please note this as well, and it's on my YouTube channel, when Gary Nolan did that recent interview at that event up in New York City, and made some bold statements. He literally said that a lot of people like in his inner circle feel that most of the world's major religions probably stem from interactions with this particular phenomenon. And I just keep going back to that. And I'm like, maybe that's really like the part that they're afraid to tell people, is that the foundation of a lot of people's religious beliefs are basically like pseudo. They're just, it's not what they think it is. It's an illusion of some kind. And again, that doesn't mean there's no God. That doesn't mean that there's no divine source that we're connected to, because I do believe that that's probably the case, just based on my own research. But I think it would really, really upset a great deal of people if they found out that their religion was basically created by extraterrestrials for a specific task and purpose. For all we know, it could have been an experiment.
But that's my point. Here's this. So what? Let's say it's a created religion. We're a cargo cult. But we're on the bottom of this, right? Yes. We're the cult, the cargo cult,
great
right?
Phrase.
Let's say we're this. Yes. How do we know? Just because it's a little g God does not mean it's not a God to us. I know what I'm interacting with is the phenomenon, but I still find myself CE5 praying to them about stupid shit, right? Come on. That's my point, is the individual doesn't have to necessarily believe that it's some all power. If it's capable, like Valet control system, that's what a God is essentially anyway. Think about this. Even if a Christian God, it always found it ridiculous for me that, you know, if you screwed up, it was your fault because you're human. But anything good, make sure you give praise, which is all great and good. But it's designed and based on the original, in my opinion, Akashic record, what came, because again, all of that sounds a lot like, you know, from the created in their own image, all these other things. So what's up, Screen?
What up, though? Y'all are talking about some awesome stuff. This is it's been out for a couple months, at least the first part of it. I've been talking about it almost every day. Weaponization of UAP. The documentary John Burroughs is doing with Professor Simon Race Hobbs and the other dude. Sorry, I'm a little out of breath. I'm like doing stuff. Basically, it's exactly what y'all are talking about. The problem is these plasma beings or EMF frequencies, whatever you want to call it, are physically taking shape in the observer's belief, and it's manipulating reality. So just because it's like their belief or it's been manifested doesn't mean it's not real. That's the issue, right? That's what they don't want us to know.
Sorry.
I'm going to share it. It's very, try to get past Race Hobbs' voice. It's packed with information, even though his voice makes you want to fall asleep.
Hey, I know that since what, the 70s, because of MK Ultra and stuff, they've been able to put thoughts and stuff in our head, right? So also, Screen, John Alexander talks about the whole phenomenon in a different aspect. There's a couple people that do talk about it differently. Like a lot of it, a weaponization of that. It's a psyop or it's this or that. And you got to understand, a lot of it is. So how many of our experiences were not ET? I can promise you're going to be surprised. How many of our experiences were, what is it, Blackwater, what's their name, Z, I don't know, Academia, who knows what it is, were an NGO with a craft. Yeah, guys, one of the things that people need to wake up to right now, the United States government not only has had a craft for X amount of time, you're hearing right now that Lockheed may have had a craft. Well, guess what, guys? Imagine people who shouldn't have them, such as a company that's mercenaries, right? Having them. Now, what would you do with that craft? You can do whatever the fuck you want with that thing. Ask yourselves this as well. Alaska, why have we heard about that? What was shot down? Was it because that's when they woke up and realized NGOs fucking have craft? So I asked myself, how many of our sightings was an NGO as a psyop? Because there's quite a few that are that. So Screen makes a lot of good points. We just got to start weighing the fact that since the what, 50s, 60s, or shit, maybe sooner. Because again, we can go back to the whole, I get 1890s air blimp flap, right? Airship. Was that from an 1850s crash in frickin' Montana? No, Idaho, I think it was. I'm going to think of it. I'm messing the Trapper one, right? So, and then it was during the Civil War, and Lincoln's own Secret Service or something along those lines come to this artifact that has, now think about this, an article in the 1850s paper talking about this thing that crashed from the sky that has hieroglyphs. Hieroglyphs. Multiple papers talk about it, right? Was that the first crash? I think it's Idaho Falls is where it's at, I think, right? Maybe that's it. And perhaps that was reversed engineered. So this has been going on for a minute. I actually started questioning whether, oh shit, man, maybe we've had these craft long before anyone, even David is talking about. Like 1933 is what David mentions. That's the earliest known that we have. But do we? Now, to hide them, we put them in the private sector. These private sector people were supposed to reverse engineer it and do this tech and this. Well, why would stop them? Because, again, you can ask them, do you have this technology? It's private. They don't have to tell you. What would stop them from just developing an entire thing and having it on their own? Hell, BlackRock, which is something somebody needs to pay attention to. The corruption that you've been hearing about isn't just about politics or Ukraine. Imagine if you had the capability of having said craft. But not only that, you're literally considered the fourth branch of the government, okay? Not only that, you can control the way the information gets in and out. Because, yes, you only own X amount of shares of this media, but when you own 90% of the companies that advertise on that media, that's a strong weapon. You can control who talks about what, when, and where. All of this conversation that's being held up, that's why I keep saying it's a lot darker than nuts and bolts for multiple reasons. Our government wants to keep it secret because the woo's deep. The rest of the world wants it. I said the NGOs want it secret, the billionaires, because, hey, they got shit that you don't, and they can do whatever the hell they want, right? Who was up?
Well, what if the woo is just EMF, right? Now it's not phenomena anymore.
Oh, shit. It can be that too, man. Literally, all woo for us is the electromagnetic spectrum is a series of vibrations that are doing different things, right? You vibrate the right way, you can create whatever you want, do whatever you want. Our government's already figured out a little bit of the ways of what kind of EM spectrum to get us to see things or feel things, or that's why they tell you, like, sometimes when you feel like you just had a bad experience, has something to do with like electricity when you're around it, right? So this spectrum, if you take it across the board, vibrated it. Now, holographic principle. What's a holograph? Does not mean what you think. If you're able to manipulate energy in any way, EM spectrum, you can do whatever you want, make people see, feel, and that's why Charles Fort, he'll talk about, it's called, he goes, when you have an experience, consider it an enchantment. You're not necessarily having the experience you're having the experience they want you to have. Now we got a question, is that humans? Or is it NHI that are making us do it? Because humans have they've come a lot further than we think. And I can tell you for a fact, the whole Scott Andrews thing is proof to that. He was a space communicator, and his sole job, I believe, was for that. Now, it's a matter of weighing what was what. So I'm glad you brought all that stuff up, Screen. Who was up? Was it Michael or Andy?
Yes, it was I. Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to address a couple of things. Tom, you said that Christians were looking down and not looking up. I don't know if you're aware of the observatory that the Catholic Church has in Arizona, near Flagstaff.
Yep, I know exactly what you're talking about.
They're looking up. there's speculations that they know more than they're letting on.
I would agree with that, and this is why Grush had even mentioned the Vatican. Lou Elizondo has met with officials at the Vatican. It's the average everyday Christian that may not be looking into these things. Yeah,
that's why I'm here to enlighten a lot of them. And I live in a town that's filled with Christians of all kinds of denominations. Most of them are believers, so that's comforting. I don't have to enlighten them very much, but there's always pushback. Shane, he talked about Vernal and Skinwalker Ranch. I'm of the belief that, like Aztec, like Chaco, Roswell, Magdalena, Socorro, all the way down in South America, it all runs along the Palenque line, right or left, not more than 100 miles either side. And the phenomenon has been alive and well. Some of the petroglyphs that are found point to that. Some of the things that can only be seen from the sky definitely point to that. The Nazca lines. So whether they're connected or not, maybe somebody will tell us. But recently I ran into a friend that lives up in Unitah, and she has the privilege of having the vanity plate Unitah on her Forerunner. And I had come out of the grocery store. She's down here visiting family. And I saw her walking. I said, Unitah? And she goes, yeah. And she goes, oh, Michael. And, we did our greetings and all that. And I said, oh, yeah? And she goes, oh, you wouldn't believe this shit that goes on up there. That's a quote verbatim to what she said. I didn't expect that out of her. But I believe she was telling me the truth. You really will have to be there to believe the shit that goes on up there. Much like down here in the Four Corners. Seeing is believing. You're not going to see that by looking down. And that's what Stanton Friedman always encouraged, to look up. Because that's where it's all at.
Yes.
Up in the sky.
Sometimes it makes me sad to think that J. Allen Hynek and Stanton Friedman and all those people, Douglas Kehoe, that they're not going to be around to see their work comes to fruition, which they paved the way for what we're doing right now. And I think that's a very important legacy. And I think it would behoove us to not forget where it started.
Hey, can you bring up Zhang, please? I can't. You guys are going to have to do that. For some reason, I can't bring anybody up and it won't let me. Andy, go ahead.
Hey, so I just wanted to chime in, a lot of what was just being discussed and everything, with the historical accounts and those sorts of things and the religious things. I think one of the things that kind of gets lost in those conversations that shouldn't as much is the time element of this phenomenon. And I think as much as we can't trust whatever you see can use things in your own subconscious and all of that sort of thing, that's been known for a long time. We have to think that also you can't really trust that any of these historical accounts about these things are that actually occurred historically. You know what I mean? These could very well be either time traveling people or time traveling AI things as well. And I just think that that has been really popularized over the last since 2017, the time element of this. And I think that there's a very good reason for that as this stuff unfolds. Is not only can you basically not trust anything that your senses tell you about it, you can't really trust anything historically also. And I think what Tom DeLonge said, what you were saying, Thomas, about how the Greek myths and stuff are true. I believe what he was saying there is that the people reported things that they saw as they actually happened to them, not as whether or not they're 100% true or not. I think that's an important distinction to make.
I agree, Andy. And those are all good points too. And I wanted to point out that as we talk about these different things, like, for example, secret machines. I think it's kind of a known thing. It's kind of a blueprint without weaving fact with fiction about these different things. So it's our job to weigh the fact and fiction.
Could just be me, but I'm not hearing anybody.
Hey, you want to let him know, Tom, that he needs to leave and come back?
Ty, I don't know if you can hear me. You probably have to reset, man. I've had that happen before.
Yeah, tell him that I was talking. He does it again. I'm going to come through that
It's
phone.
And I'll say this too, just real quick. Mine's gonna crash probably within like 45 minutes because of BlueStacks. Does it every time, so it's gonna happen to me at some point today too.
Not even a problem. That's live.
Just gotta leave and come
Just
back.
let Total come back.
So I have to leave
you can't hear me.
back to hear anybody?
Gotcha. Here, I'll message him real quick.
Ty, if you can hear me, you got to drop back down. Shane can't hear you. Nobody can.
All right, cool. So before we get on the screen, do me a solid, guys. Retweet the space, and we'll keep talking a little more woo. And we can always talk nuts and bolts because, again, all of this is the same. For us, if it was an advanced civilization casting a holograph from wherever, just consider it a 3D printer in some form, right? Taking information, which is what everything in the universe is, something that's digital that we can't even see, and making it into something we see. That there's no difference in that whatsoever than what we're experiencing from what I'm talking about. So the nuts and bolts in this, same thing. And I'll say that I actually screamed before you go that I had actually heard the same thing, that Rendlesham may not have been what people think it was. So that it might have been our own shit. But go ahead, Screen.
Yeah, that seems to be what it's you know, the deeper you go, the more you start to hear that type of stuff about Rendlesham, right? They also cover that in the documentary. I shared both playlists that are definitely, at least watch the first half of the presentation. They usually discuss it afterwards. But this is what, like, to break it down, how much of a serious deal this is. Most UFO or UAP sightings start with lights. They see plasma first or something like that. Everything we see in reality is light bouncing off of vibrations or off of sound waves, right? Plasma is light and vibration. So it could be its own world in there for all we know. The time dilation comes from that, because there is so much math there, and it's rewriting reality. Not like this is in your subconscious. It's manifesting what's in your subconscious in the physical. That's what people aren't understanding. It's literally writing reality. That's why it's such a huge deal. But the problem is there's side effects from that, right? Radiation, other stuff. That's the issue for me. People should be aware of this stuff so they could at least, like, you don't have to say, hey, there's aliens, but you should say, hey, there's this plasma, and, you should protect yourself from it. At a very minimum, I'd be cool with that. But as far as the looking up and stuff, a lot of this stuff, you have all these tunnels or cave stories. There's usually tunnel systems under these places like Giza and these other megalithic sites. That's the stone that these tunnels are made out of is reflecting EMF as well. So you're having experiences down there in the tunnels just like you would if you were looking up. So going the other way is just as important. There's also the Ukraine data. Chris Lato talks about it. It's basically from two different observatories in Kiev, miles apart. It's an object that's not reflecting EMF. It's over 100 meters and moving over Mach 60 at times. That is ridiculous. My question is, if you're not subject, like, say you have the ability to do modern day MK Ultra with EMF instead of psychedelics, which seems to be the case, what does it look like when you're not surrounded by the light and vibrations, right? Is that the void? What's going on there? That's where my mind goes to.
Man, see, that's the stuff I've been thinking about lately. That stuff. The deeper, I don't know how all of this connects, right? Because we're in a position now that we know our government's been lying to us, right? How much of it have they been lying to us about, and how in depth? And I know that they're killing people were, and it's probably still are, over the consciousness connections, in my opinion, like what's real and what's fake. They need to keep a psyop going to hide their shit, but at the same time, something that we don't understand is here, which is where we're getting all this tech and stuff, because people don't want to hear it, because for them, religious and all these things, we're a cargo cult, essentially. I mean, for one of these, I guess I'd say one of these in HI, maybe it's all of them. Again, it could be a control system. You got 1933. We probably got our freaking jet engines from that, right? I mentioned the flat before that. Maybe our airships, right? And then you keep going along this way. How much have we been getting? You've got fiber optics. You've got all these things that have always been in Corso's book, right? And that are mentioned about this topic. Now, let's also go over to, was it Fravor? When he talks about, somebody mentioned time travel. Again, this is what this is about, searching for Scott Andrews. I know it says Scott Andrews. This is about everything, because that's what his whole, the woo is everything. So I often mention as well that I'd go outside and this, whatever's going on would be there. So Fravor talks about something being at a cat point when he gets there. Or all of this is pretty much, if you're a 5D, and I say 5D, right? If you're some kind of a 5D civilization, or the other thing is you're manipulating our minds in a way that we perceive it as such. You can see and be anywhere at all times. You know things before they're happening, right? So it's not a matter of watching the film and selecting them. It's, you know everything all at once, but you can also, the hardest part about all of this, if our United States government already has the tech with our minds, right, to put things in our head, this is what's crazy, man. Before we get to Screen, because I know Screen and I may differ on what's what, but we do agree on quite a bit that there's some bullshit going on, and some of it's ours and all these other things. I'll say that one of the things that was fucking with my head is, like, I know for a fact I was getting downloads. I was having trouble figuring out if it was human or NHI that was giving me the shit. It sounds wild, but because I knew that we've had that ability, do you know what it feels like to be like, oh, I'm just doing this, and all of a sudden, oh shit, that's what that means. And then go to a source or go piece something together, and later on you're like, how am I getting this? Or for your source, when you tell him something like, hey, did you do this? Because, and then he's like, oh shit. And you piece some shit together from it. It's like, oh, you didn't do that? Because I don't understand why that was right there where it was supposed to be. So that's the whole point of this conversation. How much of this is tech and how much is, well, shit, I guess all the woo could be tech if you're far enough advanced. Go ahead, Screen.
Yeah, that's a great question, man. Because like, all right, like the cat point thing, right? The only issue I have with that is, like you said, if they're moving outside of time, that doesn't really matter. But that was the first time they used the cat point that day, but it had been used previously. So that's something a lot of people don't pick up on or mention. So you know so that's not really like if they had never used that cat point before, I would be way more impressed with it. But to the downloads, right? Even those, man. You know, my problem is, I feel like this knowledge has been around. You know, it's just been passed down through secret societies or certain families or whatever the case may be. Tesla was into all this stuff, right? And you get a lot of overlap with like magic and esoteric and stuff like that. But essentially, because I would get what I would call downloads, but the more I think about it, they might not actually be downloads. Because like the more you understand everything at a base level, because of the fractal nature of everything, you can apply it to everything. So if you just understand nature, you can do anything. You just do it how nature does it. You just repeat it in a different way. So that knowledge would have been around way before us, because we're distracted with everyday things. People that didn't have to, you know, punch a clock or whatever, they probably figured nature out way, way back, you know? So to me, it's always been around. Even the government, right? Tesla had a remote controlled boat at the World Fair. People thought it was magic because they couldn't understand the frequencies or radio signals. And when he died, government got all his paperwork, and pretty much the CIA got all his paperwork, or who would become the CIA. And they're the ones that are allegedly, with the drones and keeping all this shit secret. So it just kind of lines up. But like I reached out to this dude. He was recreating some of Boyd Bushman stuff, and I was trying to get him to come talk to us about, like anti-gravity type stuff. And basically, his response was, "I'm working on this immortal stuff now, so that way I can live forever." So it's like the amount of stuff that is going to be out and happening. I just people will understand. Like it kind of got put in perspective for me because I saw anti-gravity and then invisibility within 30 seconds of each other. If I would have saw one and then the other one like years later, like, it might have been different. But because I saw them within 30 seconds of each other, it really blew my mind. And I was just like, oh, well, that's just tech, right? So like pretty much anything is possible. And pretty much at this point it is. And the tech is getting so cheap, and people are doing really cool things in their garages. But most importantly, this knowledge that's been like hidden or protected or bogarted, for so long is coming out, and people are sharing it, like with the internet and everything else. And I think that's what's super important too, and that's where we're at. But it always comes back to like consciousness or psi or EMF, which is like, that's why I keep trying to preach it. People like John Hutchinson, right? Or Healy back in the day. I think he was in like the early 1900s. But basically, they would tune these machines like atmospheric generators and stuff like that aren't supposed to be possible. But only they would work while that person was in the vicinity. And so the people always thought they were scams or whatever, but what they didn't realize is that it was probably just tuned to that person's specific EMF, which is pretty much psi. So we control EMF with our body. We can detect it. We just write it off because we have tools and stuff nowadays, and we don't need that to survive. But if you train that, or train your body, amazing stuff can happen, and it's all coming out, I feel like.
Appreciate that, Screen. And you're right. It is all coming out. David and old A-Tip put a plan together. Doesn't matter what side of the fence you are on what's what, or if something's here, or if it's our tech. Our tech came from something that wasn't ours. Point is, he started something that's about to blow the fuck up. And when I say blow the F up, I mean, we're us, because we kind of understand what's going on. The rest of the world's probably going through a little ontological shock, right? Like, what? I can promise you it's going to get way more. And that whole God thing, I think people are going to have to revisit what that means, what consciousness is, right? What time travel is. I swear to myself that I remember telling myself a story, and it used to get me through treatment back in the day when Wounded Warrior sent me in. I was there for about, I think between the two spots, like 6 months, self-submitted myself. I needed help, had to get myself right. I'm used to telling myself a story. Now it kind of blows my mind that I used to tell myself that story, because I used to talk about, I would take my traumatic experiences. I was a time traveler, and that's how I could travel. And every time I traveled back to one of those traumatic experiences, I could move backwards from that or forward from that a little more each time. And it made no sense. I just tell myself this story, and because the reason I did this is keep your mind busy. It helps you sleep. You're not worrying about stuff. And again, I had screwed my life up, was a homeless addict, probably looking at prison and stuff at the time. So I was just telling myself this story, and come to find out later on, you think about time in the way we've been discussing, that there is no before and after. It's all happening at once. It's all relevant. I guess what's relevant is, what dimension or how you're perceiving it, because it's not necessarily about dimension. If we think of it as a perception, how many times have you had deja vu, or you've seen something in your mind or had a flashback. What is that really? Are we sure that that's not exactly what that is? And I know there's actually been some time travel as a form of the, I guess PTSD is a form of time travel because of, like I spoke about at the beginning of this conversation, when you go through trauma, you take details, so many details. And that's why you have flashbacks. So this is part of the stuff that I always wonder about. Like, why did I tell myself that story? And now I actually kind of understand time to be a little bit like that. That's where I start questioning things. Go ahead. Was it no, actually it was Jean. Go ahead, Jean.
Hey, all. Thanks for this space and let me jump up. One note about the reception, the weirdness of the tech of the space. I mean, like, seems like every time I go walking on this trail, where there's a couple of bad spots, if I'm like a speaker or something, like all kinds of crazy stuff happens. I'm in like this little valley, so I don't know. Maybe that's one of the reasons people have issues. But anyway, thought about the religion aspect that I wanted to try to tie back to the tech topic because that's kind of how the conversation moved in the last few minutes. But excuse me. Yeah, so like I grew up in a Christian home and the father was like a minister, so I've been exposed a lot to the material and the brain processes there. But as I got out of Christianity through the door of like mythology and just studying world religions and other history and stuff, eventually went back and tried to read, like the Genesis origin story again with like an unbiased eyes. And when you read that from like a modern perspective, it almost comes across like it's and people think it's talking about the formation of the universe through God or whatever, but it kind of looks localized because they're just talking about the sun and the other heavenly bodies, like a couple of the planets that you can see in the mornings and the moon. And then, of course, the constellations, which get out of control in some of the apocalyptic literature. But yeah, my point is, like, it just looks really localized. Like, it doesn't really look like it applies to, like, the full universe. I mean, yeah, there's some stories about, Abraham being told to look up at the night and look at all those stars, and that's how many descendants he was going to have or whatever. So people probably take that the extra mile to assume that the origin story is talking about the whole universe. I mean, because that's all you can do back then is look up at the sky at night, and you're going to
I've
see
always
what you can
loved that
see.
point.
But anyway, seemed like it's kind of localized. And one thing I
I'm,
thought about is like, what was that? Go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, I just wanted to include something after you're done.
Okay, I'll be short because I'm going back into the bad spot. But if it wasn't like an all omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient kind of spiritual being, kind of God, I mean, and if it was instead like some, I don't know, explored, like some adventurous group of whatever alien scientists that ended up in our little corner of the universe. I mean, who's to say that little group of entities are even alive? I mean, like, if they're dead or like they only have a certain amount of lifespan, and like, what if some of the foo that we tend to talk about, what if some of that is like actually what we would call legacy tech, and what if it's like in a slightly broken down state because it hasn't necessarily been updated? Like, that's just a couple of thoughts I had. I'll get off. Thanks a lot.
No, appreciate that, man.
Yeah.
One of the reasons, sorry, Ty, before you go on, one of the reasons I like these spaces is because all of your opinions is how I either check myself or form mine. And I promise you, there's no better place for an exchange of ideas about the phenomenon than here, outside of typing. So go ahead, Ty.
Yeah, no, I think it, and you know, I just saw that Holly's in here, and something I've been thinking about for a long time was like creating this not investigation, but this like series of like where you go to these places like the pyramids, like the Serpent Mound, and all these real like places with like real ancient lore, and these places that somewhat, I don't know, stand out from our reality, and then performing like heist or C5, with you know peer review, and all of that, and seeing if there's actually something to all this, and like the group intention and intent, and consciousness, and how it all ties into it, at these places of where the veil seems to be thinnest, if you will.
Hey, look,
And I know
before we get a
Holly's,
screen,
yeah, Holly's doing some crazy investigation, so it
I
popped
can
in
tell
my
you,
mind. Sorry.
Holly's on point. I love Holly, actually. Some of the best spaces you'll ever hear. So make sure you attend hers. But I'll tell you that ICE5, that's all part of this. I don't understand it. But the thing is, maybe academics doesn't take it so serious, but I know that Fort talks about that, right? You got no ways it Keel that has the quote about outside the box. No, it's Keel. Academics got to take outside the box type stuff, right? So the more we plug at it, the more we exchange ideas. But here's the sucky part that it tends to happen to all of us. We get caught up in the drama. Some of the drama is actually the government doing some CI shit. We're here because of specific people and things, right? But it's very important that even when we exchange ideas, we may not like them. We may think it's this or that, but it's only with that exchange of ideas, which is part of the reason this whole compartmentalized program shit has, right, led us to X amount. How you got NGOs with probably better craft than the United States government has outside of our new upgraded MJ12 shit, right? But we got to keep doing this stuff. Just be respectful, talk about these different subjects. And again, man, I wouldn't be alive and I wouldn't know the things that I know following this journey if it wasn't for these rooms. I keep gravitating these spaces when I'm hurting, when my soul's wounded, when I'm lonely. Lacey's in here. I hope you're feeling better too. Screen, Kimball.
Well,
I've met these people in person, a lot of them, and some of them in these spaces day in and day out. They saved my life. So they're like friends. So this exchange ideas is important, Ty. And I'm glad you said something, but let's get the screen real quick. He's had his hands up for an hour and a half because Shane can be an asshole.
No, I actually had my hand up because I was talking so much earlier that I didn't want to like keep talking. But as far as it does seem like a local deal. I will agree with that, but it is like a fractal universe, right? So it probably does apply similarly all the way out. But as far as the time thing, like we get caught up as like from a human perspective. Even the downloads I question because, downloads aren't always correct in my experience. But I think they're more like epiphanies, right? I think we're putting the information together, but because of the way we experience time, we feel like it's a download, but it could just be us getting that information from ourselves in the future because we already figured that out. Because when I had the TR3B experience, that's what was so fascinating about it to me, because I'm still open to it being like some type of plasma that took shape or manifested into my beliefs. I'm still open to it being alien. I'm still open to it being government. I'm just not sure. I didn't see anybody waving to me or like any, graphics or anything on it, like I love humans or something, So like, it's just like there was things from that, like the Vanta Black and the way that it was probably like operating on little gravity pockets, like little micro pockets, not one like big thing. Like there was stuff I took away from that I didn't understand at the time, So it's like that's what's interesting to me. If that was like a projection or a manifestation that became physical somehow, how would it know to encode stuff that I'm not even really aware of consciously? Am I aware of it subconsciously? It's like that stuff is like fascinating to me.
Screen, I'm going to tell you, like where I live, there's books about living plasma. Where I'm at, there's the Earthlight theory, right? The whole thing you're talking about. And that's why I say, guys, we're living in a cornucopia of NHI, some of it AI, some of it worker bees, some of it possibly we perceive as God, some of it ours. That's not the NHI, but some of it ours. So it's our job to kind of weigh these different things. And what I find actually kind of cool is how these rooms kind of started and all these about the nuts and bolts 50, 60 years ago or 90 years ago, technically, right? That's where we're at. And we're right. We're on the cutting edge of, hey, guys, there's something else out there, whether it's consciousness, God, time travelers, fifth dimensional beings, which we wouldn't understand anything, but we would see them as God. I'm going to start, I guess, doing, some of these spaces a little more often as well to kind of talk about these different things. But I'm trying to figure out what my next move is. Like I got my Old Vets UAP Symposium on YouTube, and I post my old content. I'm going to start doing some news updates and things there. But also, guys, if you have a story to tell, I'm going to spend here in the next, couple of weeks, I'm going to take off on a train. Just want to kind of interviews, talk to people. So if you want to meet up, bullshit, right? And you're not an axe murderer, because I'm not, just holler at me, man. Let's see if we can arrange something. If you want to be recorded, cool. Not, let's just meet up, bullshit. Ty, actually, I'll see you when I go with Wounded Warrior Project to Boston, bro. So I'll make sure we meet up when I get there.
When you come to Boston.
Hey, Shane, are you coming out to New Jersey or New York area anytime soon?
I can tell you this. If you guys would like to meet up, my time is going to be open. I have nothing but life to experience, and I can always take a train and get anywhere. It may take me a little time. So reach out to me if you would actually like to meet up. Kimball, I already met up with you, bro. Man. You the bomb.
Both you and Ty.
Maybe we could have some sort of like where Tom comes. If Boston's going to be the meeting place, then Tom, then you take the train here.
I'll come up, man. Absolutely.
Oh, dude, for sure. If you're both that close, for sure, we'll do that.
Yeah. If anyone as well, so Tom and I do the podcast. So this week we just did one with Carl Crusher. This week we have Marco Leal from the Moment of Contact case. That's
so
his
exciting.
Expertise. And Philip Mantle. We're recording both of those this week. And I want to start an episode once a month where we tell three people's story. So if you want to tell your story, of course it would have to be vetted by Tom and I beforehand. But we would love to tell, to do an episode where, kind of like what Ryan Sprague does, but kind of on a smaller scale, but more detailed with each story. So if you have a story that you want to tell, definitely feel free to reach out to any one of us, Old Vet included.
That being said, actually,
definitely,
I had mentioned this a while back. So my channel, right? One of the reason I started my channel, one of the things I wanted to do, it wasn't my channel, it was your guys' channel. Because again, spaces are my favorite because of the exchange of ideas. So all I wanted was, it's your channel. If you have a story to tell, I'll give you a short with nothing but your info, where to find you, where you can tell it. It can be voice, picture. I won't talk. I don't give a shit about myself. You guys know I can talk, and I can talk a lot, and most of the time it's probably bullshit. But what I will tell you is, I'll give you a platform, because not everybody has this ability. I can send you a link, and my team, which would be Ryan and Mariah, will edit and retweet and make sure it's out there. You can go no face, no voice, anonymous. Tell your story. It can be a short. It can be whatever you want. Reach out to any of us up here, right? And their channel, my channel, it doesn't matter, right? The point is this. The more stories we have out there that people can watch, and they'll have their book moments like Basolka talks about. That moment where you read, see, watch someone talking about an experience that it finally hits you. I'm not crazy, man. I'm something, whether it's I don't understand, is interacting. And for some people, myself included, and I almost took my life because it was my lowest point. To fix your life, but everyone around you thinks you're crazier, is the worst experience any human could feel. Literally, I was a drug addict living on the streets, and I was clean and taking care of myself, and everyone thought I was fucked up. I go to my fucking Twitter. I always say this on podcasts. My pinned thread, the reason I leave that there, that was a suicide note. That was me saying, hey, I wasn't always a piece of shit, guys. I used to do good shit. And now that's what that was. But I had people from UFO Twitter, these spaces, that I'm so appreciative of, that kind of stepped in and kind of helped me out. So thank you guys very much. And was it Lynn, are you up? And then scream.
Hey, Shane, another great space. Real quick, I just wanted to say, so yesterday I was in one of your spaces where you were, you shared some very personal things about your mother and your life and the struggles you've been through. And then I hear you on this space welcoming everybody to share their story with you, you know, offering to meet up if you happen to, you know, be around their city. Hey, if you're around Michigan, hit me up. You have my info. I really commend you. I think you are so unique and just a really special person. The way that you share your experience, the way that you connect with people is really cool.
Damn. Thank you, Lynn. Shit. Actually, Lynn, let me tell you this. For someone who had no
That's what
friends,
it's all about, man.
for someone who had no friends, had nothing, I literally left. This is so wild. I left treatment with Wounded Warrior Project 2020 during the pandemic, and I was finally ready to connect with people because part of my PTSD was losing the military and no connections, and I couldn't. There was no one. There was no VA. There was nothing. But what there was is everybody telling me I was fucking batshit insane for living in Yakima Valley and going through an experience that multiple people have had here. And somehow I stumbled across an interview with Lou Elizondo, who talks, and he mentioned, did he mention UFO Twitter? I can't remember, but I found UFO Twitter, and that shit show, which is you guys. I mean, where else can we go to talk about this stupid shit? To ask, is this real? Did this happen? I mean, again, trauma plays into this. So there's a lot of us are broken individuals. There's no problem with that. But because of our past or something that may have happened, it's very hard for us to discuss because we know where we'll fall. And that kind of sucks. So that's why I like these rooms, and I'll try to get back to these, and I will hit you up, Lynn. So for sure. Kimball, I got to meet you, bro. We had a good time down at Contact, huh? For sure. So, Screen, what's up? Go ahead.
Yeah, just wanted to preach about EMF a little bit more. You were talking about the lights and stuff where you live at. I actually live on a fault line, and same thing. We had plasma lights around here when I was a kid. They had ghost stories that went with them, though, because we're like deep south, you know, holy city. So, of course, it would have ghost stories. But yeah, it's interesting to know that the natives knew all about it. The more I researched it, and this is stuff people don't know. Even locals don't know this stuff. Like, I had to learn this stuff myself. It's you know, that there's very high pressure and frequencies going on at fault lines as well. That's why you always see these things, and especially ley lines. I actually happen to be on 33rd. You know, Gisa's on the 33rd. It's like the big one that runs like near the equator. You know, it's all this stuff plays a part, and it's no coincidence that you hear stuff about like light bodies or you know, light beings. And the question is this plasma or these like EMF entities or NHI, are they sentient, or is it just like an extension of our own consciousness?
So, like,
oh, also somebody mentioned where the veils were thin earlier. Those are also magnetic anomalies. So
I want to point out
once
that
again,
Screen, what he's saying, that's another suppressed, I guess you'd say, topic. So academia is doing. So apparently, this is something I learned later on. I used to call bullshit about most of this. Most people don't understand that. Even during the time I was having my experience, I was like, oh, humans they're following me everywhere. But apparently ley lines, when I guess you would say the planets align in specific ways. It affects that spectrum that we keep talking about. So remember that. I know you guys have heard, well, the alignments, this and that. We used to all call bullshit. I'm new. This is woo shit I'm new to, but I'd stop calling bullshit. Hell, we used to call bullshit on the government having craft. Not only does the government have craft, there's probably a damn craft flying around with Doritos advertisements on that damn thing, right? So we're way behind, and the woo shit's where we're at right now. So do me a favor, retweet the space. If you guys want to talk about anything up here, come on up. We'll talk about any of it. But again, reach out to me. If you need a platform, a place to tell your story, you think it's important, I will gladly give you a spot on my channel to make sure you can tell it, talk about it, because nobody would believe me at the beginning. I didn't even believe it, right? I'm at the point now, I dare you to not believe it. I have enough information and enough time spending this to understand that something's going on that I don't understand, and I can't pretend to understand what it is, but I can talk about it, and we can all do a collective effort, try to figure out what the hell's going on. Because again, one of the things that we should look at is the one human problem, right? I don't know if you know what the whole Gaia thing is, like hive mind. That's where we're going. And that's what these rooms, I think, are a prequel to. The ability to share thoughts, connections, almost instantly. But to do that is to live, I guess you would say, almost like a universal life all through time. Your experience, like through you guys, I experience all these different things, and I change my reality because of it. Does that make any sense? Go ahead, Screen.
Yeah, I was just going to say, now that we know, of course we need more information about it, but now that we know that consciousness can manipulate EMF, similar to when I had my TR3B experience, how not that I heard a voice in my head, but it was like my own thought, like my own voice that popped into my head. Go let the dogs out. And then I fought with myself almost like the angel and the devil on my shoulder, because I was like, I just let them out. And then it's like, well, I'd want to be so I end up letting them out, and there's the TR3B. What if it's just as simple as matching frequencies that you're tuned to, and that's psychic, like a psychic radio in a sense. Like you tune your walkie-talkies to channel 3, you both tune you meditate, tune to channel 3. This is stuff that like needs to be studied more, and we don't know that stuff isn't still possible. That's what's super interesting about all this.
Beyond super interesting. It's one of the things that actually,
and that's EMF once again.
Well, yeah, EMF. So I'm under the impression too,
it's
like
everything.
I'll call EMF the base, right? That's how everything we perceive is probably being pushed to us in some way. Maybe that's our connection to the Akashic record. I don't understand all of this. Again, I'm not some kind of a scientist. What I'm saying is that everything's connected in a way we don't understand. Some of it's our tech, but our tech is derived from what, right? And I know you mentioned TR3B, and I've heard that the TR3B was disinfo, but the TR3X, which is probably what you saw, might be real, right? Like we have craft and they're triangle-ish looking. But then again, now I don't know, because NGOs got the shit. And again, if we've had the ability to put shit in humans' heads since the 70s, how much of what we're perceiving is real, reality? And if you had the ability, which our government does, to stay hidden, to fly around, doing whatever, how would you conduct tests? You wouldn't get, MK Ultra didn't go away. It changed its name, right? I know Terry Lovelace talks about an incident he has. Now, was that all human? Putting shit that there was grays there as well? Or was it that? Did we have a treaty? I think that's one of the things as well. This shit's so complicated. People are not going to understand how much the United States government's hiding, right? Probably part of some galactic federation. Been getting help on the side, on the down low, and been killing each other, or killing, I guess, that their citizens, just to keep that hidden. Go ahead. What's up, buddy?
Hey guys, love you. There's a couple of really cool thoughts that are kind of flipping around, and I certainly have been promoting, exploring the idea, and it's that our magnetosphere now is at 35% strength. I mean, it's dropping like a stone. We know the last pole flip, it doesn't just flip, it goes to zero for a few hundred years, and it just obliterates. That radiation just kills so much. It killed all the megafauna 42,000 years ago during the Adams event. And if you were an advanced civilization, you noticed a planet with intelligent species that were just about to be able to leave their planet with their own technology. But when doing the calculation, you see their magnetosphere is about to die. It's actually the last flip was the last one, and this one is just the power going out. You know, Mars looked like Earth at one point. It had a magnetosphere, which is what allowed it to have rivers and all sorts of different things we can't see now, but certainly can imagine by the logic of everything in science. And so, to make a long story short, maybe that's why they would be gifting craft, because they calculate that it would happen quicker than our natural evolution. That's why they're going in and out of volcanoes and the deepest cracks in the ocean. That's why they're fleets, because they would have to work cooperatively as a group of mass, essentially, doing very complicated dance in the convecting the inner core of the Earth to keep our magnetosphere, the dynamo of our magnetosphere going. So they could be just like desperately trying to do everything to keep it going fast enough for us to, get smart. And we've been hindered 70 years by not having disclosure. Our kids have been hindered, our dreaming, our imagination, our technology. And it's, that is an interesting notion. Does that fit with anything? Of course, there's other things happening, black projects and different stuff, but does that sound like a notion that's interesting to know?
All I can say is this. If it wasn't for people like Buddy, Alien Protocols, Astral, I would know nothing about the astral plane, remote viewing, psi abilities. This is something that now I'm being introduced to. Well, I've been introduced to, that now things make a little more sense. And I'm not saying in any way anyone's special. What I'm saying is I think we all have this ability, which Alien Protocols, Buddy, happens to be excellent at, right? Remote viewing and shit like that. I actually wondered, I remember I started this with Astral, and I remember one of the things that I didn't understand is how do you stop from seeing bad shit, right? Shit gets put in your head. Maybe you can answer me on that real quick, buddy, because after I did a space, the very second space that I did with remote viewing, I think it was his second space, Astral. We were doing, maybe people remember it. We were searching for a lost cat. I saw a dead cat. I didn't want to do remote viewing ever again, right? I couldn't stop seeing it.
Much worse.
You know what I mean?
So much worse. Oh, I sure do. It gets so much worse. When if you're stuck in a lose-lose kind of moral dilemma, when someone reaches out to you and says, "Hey, can you help me find Cody Bigsby? He's my cousin. I'm officially part of the search team. We're searching for him. The police are looking, and blah blah blah. Can you do anything?" And I do a viewing, and they turn it to the police, and it was a horrible viewing. The father, I don't want to get into it and get you guys disturbed, but the father killed his son just out of anger, just being just hurt people. Long story short, a lot of that stuff you do. In general, I don't just, I'm pretty good with just being all positive, but if I run into someone broken or hurting or crying or different situations, I was just bawling literally about 3 minutes before this, watching a little bit of the Ukraine stuff, thinking about women who couldn't leave the cities. They wouldn't leave the cities. Older people get really cranky pants and they do not want change. They're tired. They're weak. A little bit of them is just like, I give up. I don't care if I get blown up. And a lot of those cities people think are empty. It's not like young people living there. It's the elderly who are suffering and dying alone and all these terrible things, So, to answer your question, I'm always tilting myself, and I've done it so much too good that fortunately I don't get dragged into negative too much, but I do. I'm susceptible to it. I don't like seeing injustices because I'm like, oh, fuck, I gotta get involved.
You mentioned negative. Well, like, here's what the reason I'm going to bring this up is for me, like with this phenomenon, I know we were talking about RB, but in my head, you can both have a negative and positive experience. For example, my interaction with the phenomenon was terrifying at first, and it fucked my life up. But I'm very aware, and I've been going through it because it fixed me. Maybe I fixed me because of it. I don't know any of this yet. But what I'm saying is, I'm in a place where I can handle my life crumbling down, and I can also handle the fact that I don't look. I get so tired of it. I wonder if people believe me when I say my interaction with the phenomenon's everywhere all the time. I share it with people like Toby and Rosa all the time. All the time. And for things to pop into my head and I wonder who did that? How crazy does it sound for me to say this right now? Who just put that in my head? That's my reality. And it sucks that sometimes I'm like, but don't share that. I know I don't have anybody I'll probably ever share it with face to face because, you know, I'm already trying to outlive because any human, man, woman, child, doesn't want to be the sum of their worst decisions, which is what I'm trying to get past. So why the fuck would I make the choice to talk about these things and do these things? I sure as fuck wouldn't make the choice to see a UAP and then talk about the fact that I have downloads and this and that. And most people who want to call bullshit can go back to my very first podcast I did, was Witness Citizen. I make a comment about downloads. I said, what if the information you got wasn't good? What would you do with that? How do you explain that? And because it's a download, right? What if you knew it for a fact? And then that's all I wanted to talk about because I knew what it sounded like. But that was me tipping off. And here I am, willing to sound like an asshole. And I know I don't because there's people like Buddy who talks about this psi shit all the time where I got my stuff, right? But I'm saying my life is such that sometimes I wonder, all right, dude, is this real? Is this, am I losing my shit? But that's just my reality. And who do you go to with stuff like that besides these rooms? Hell, I don't know. There's many people outside of these rooms that would take some of the stuff I say seriously yet, but that's coming. Just like the whole nuts and bolts just busted loose, right? Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, man. So something that's been weighing really heavily, like on my heart, soul, mind, everything for weeks now, but over the last 3 days has really been pressing down on me, is this feeling that I really can't shake. And I mean, I'm not one to say things like this. It's not to attract like attention to myself. I'm not having like visions or anything like that, but I'm being really genuine and honest when I say this. I have the strongest feeling that something's about to happen. Like, I'm serious. And I've seen other people. I was just reading a Reddit post like 20 minutes ago. Somebody said something very similar to what I'm saying now. It's this sensation that I describe it like somebody's blowing up a balloon, and it's stretching, and it's right there. It's right at that point where it's just about to pop. It's gonna burst. But it's like what that would feel like if that was an emotion, if that was something that was tangible in that manner. And I can't get away from it. I wake up, I feel it. I'm at work, right? Like, I deliver furniture for a living. A lot of you guys know this that follow me and come to our podcast and whatnot. And it's rigorous work. And sometimes I just have these moments where like I stop and I'm just like, something's gonna happen. And I'm not saying it's bad either. I'm not saying there's like a cataclysm coming or anything like that. But just this something. I really like, I feel it in my bones. I've never felt anything like it before. It's really powerful. It's like interrupting my daily life. And I'm as regular as anybody else. I'm not diagnosed with any sort of major adverse health, disease, whatever, any of that. Like, I am treated for anxiety disorder, but that's not what this is. This isn't. It's very different. And ever since I got on the medication that I'm on currently, full disclosure, I have no issues talking about it. Works for some, not for others, but it's like shut off my anxiety. So like I can consume caffeine without being like, like all those types of things. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with what I'm talking about. So this is coming from somewhere outside of myself. Like it really feels that way. It feels like it's being like transmitted into me. I don't know what to make of it. And I'm really curious if other people are feeling the same way that I am, because it's affecting my daily life, and not negatively.
Let me ask you this.
I want to be really clear on that.
What if part of the thing is this? So I'd mentioned this whole thing started because of the mirrors, right? Access to them.
Yeah.
What if there is a way to access them? Now, we don't know this, but whether something be chemical, biological, maybe it's a medical thing, something happens to your brain, and it could be, maybe it's a negative thing, or maybe it's something positive, right? And that is what allows you access to these different things. That little slice, I often explain it like this. Sometimes it feels like I'm seeing a slice of reality that other people don't see. And I don't mean that as in like, oh, it's all going breaking loose. What is, I see the synchronicities, the connections, the people, the places, the things. And when people talk to me, sometimes I'm not always seeing these premonitions. What I see is when they talk to me and they say one thing, I often see what they mean. Does that make sense? And I don't understand it, but it usually becomes a thing, right? None of this makes any sense without the fact that fifth rail, that Akashic record, time travel, all these different things, my damaged brain allowing me to see these things. And I know Screen had talked about this earlier with Rendlesham. I know people have talked, probably heard about the different connections between the Akashic record and perhaps there's a bloodline. What do people think about that? Because that's a possibility and a plausibility. The fact that we were spliced together because of, whatever you want to be, the race. They left, right? We were their slave race, and they ended up leaving. And there's a specific bloodline that's connected to that. Is that part of it? Because I know that with Rendlesham, Burroughs, we did an article. We had talked to Burroughs, and he had specifically had mentioned too about them wanting his DNA. So go ahead, buddy, and then we'll get over to.
Yeah, there is especially a couple of these senior researchers who have a little bit of a fixation, I think, with PK displayers and high-end multi-phenomena displayers, and two different genetic sets. I think it's Eastern European and Native. The other thoughts I wanted to share with you guys was, I was listening and thinking about a lot of people saying that they feel like, these, they feel the eschaton. And the eschaton is essentially the convergence. A unique time in history where this system is very ripe. Like a farm would, the fruits are falling off already. This system, we can sense that it's, ripe, overly ripe or ripe. And this eschaton, this convergence of things that could kill us, are not fanciful. They have increased in number over humanity's existence. So it used to be just a few, but as time grows, there are more of them that present themselves that can be causes of mass extinction. We just had these AI talks. The first hydrogen bomb was 10 times more explosive than the scientists thought it was. So there's all these things chasing in this country, and how everything is so set up. A major disaster in one country could cause a global money burn and panic and all this crazy stuff. A solar flare. Right now, our magnetosphere is super weak. A solar flare could just fry and do just crazy stuff. There are countries actively thinking some of the worst things you can imagine right now. about literally ruling the planet, perhaps if they have an opportunity to do this, that, and the other. I mean, wild, unbelievable stuff. And I think this feeling you have, Shane, about this disconnection with other people over phenomena, I think, first of all, I think this is physics. And I have spoken and worked with physicists. And, I made this epiphany with Ingo Swann. Ingo Swann was affecting the particle detector with Hal Puthoff. He was trying to view the center of it. And when he was doing that, he physically affected the particle detector. The engineers freaked out. He did it again. So somehow a lump of him was in his body, but some part of him was connected to everything else. And he could focus his everything else on a location and get very high end data. And it's logical in terms of physics that everything has to have some sort of at least substructural, substrate data connection to everything else, so it all has meaning and relativity. And it's a kind of interesting thought, too, because if you think of time as space and that the universe is a giant sculpture, you're this little skinny little string embedded deep in it, but you're connected to it all. You're part of it all. You're not. There's the pervasive illusion of separateness is an illusion. You are embedded into it. So I think you learn to flex that muscle. Trauma and stress make people's lump that's here a little smaller, and therefore they can start focusing other places else and connect to things and places and so forth. So right now, Shane, what's happened is because of your trauma and your stress and everything, you are a little bit less here, but you're more connected to the things that you think are important in life and big and where the universe is from and all this stuff. You're now more connected to that. So it's not a surprise that you're going to be having effects and stuff happening every day that people are not going to understand that it's actually physical and real and not a story. Because what's happened with you now is you're in what I like to call a feedback loop. And it's kind of dangerous because if you're going bam, 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 phenomena, you can find yourself spin out of control and get out of balance. But the beauty is, my friend, now that you know you have this powerful connection, if you study and work on ESP and meditation and Vipsana, the ability to control nothingness, stillness, no problems, no stress, you will gain more control over these things. And when you do CE5s, you'll have CE5s more the way you would like them to be, like closer and more dynamic. And you'll have your ESP abilities will be much more dependable. And the last thing to share is when you're speaking to other people about this, it's like you're speaking French and you're expecting them to understand French. You have to get them in logically, just a little bit at a time. Don't expect people who don't speak French to know French, but take them and lead them in by science. Psi is definitely the real deal. And it could be as simple as the nano tubules in the brain at the tip have a 2D kind of what's essentially an antenna and a receiver, the classic shape. And that can essentially connect like it becomes like a photon that is everywhere at all times. And so all the firing in these photons are essentially everywhere at all times, and therefore through that uncertainty principle connection, this energy connects you to everything. So there's a mechanism. It's simple. It sounds right, but who fucking knows?
Good points,
But
too. And you've been. Go ahead. Sorry, bud.
No, it just seems like it really fits for a lot of people, and we're so lucky to, phenomena has historically always represented emerging new science. So this is science. We're putting the pieces together. Holy shit, it could be powerful.
I agree. I think it's science we don't understand yet. We're not all the way there. So what's up, Screen? Or wait, was it C or Screen?
I think it was me next.
Okay, go ahead,
I
C.
just wanted a couple of things to say. We're all from one bloodline because we came from one. And what's happening to us now, we are connecting to the wide area network, which is collective consciousness and wisdom. We, for too long, have been away from our subconscious energy that created us, but it's starting to take over the conscious mind that drives our senses. There's been many burning platforms over history, but this is the first time in history where people can actually get together, start to talk about what they're feeling, and turn belief into reality. And it's funny that Alien, my best friend, mentioned French. If you think about our history, what we are told in the Bible, what happened between Adam and Eve, they fell out because nobody taught them how to communicate. And that book, Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus, if you've never read it, take a glance at it. It is so true. And it's only when we start to connect and learn how to be selfless that we start to break down those boundaries. And that is what is happening. It was predicted. It had to happen sometime. And we're seeing it now. And there is absolutely, you can all prove it to yourselves the same as I have, and I've published it. We were created from a thought, emotion, the emotion of being nothing. Imagine nothing. We can't imagine nothing because we see something, but there's plenty of experiments that have happened over time and that are happening now that show energy can be created from nothing. But how does it happen if there's nothing? And it's pure emotion. You may sit there and have an idea, but you've got nothing. You haven't got the thing in your hand, but you have an idea to create, and then you go forth and create it. That comes from emotion. And that's the part that scientists have been missing from their equations since the beginning of time. We focus so much on mathematics. We should be focusing on emotion. Because if you look at the world around you, every problem we have is based on emotion, caused by relationships. That's who we are, and that's what the universe is. So start to think about that. Thank you.
Real quick, before anybody else jumps in, you have a wonderful, wonderful like narration voice. I don't know if anybody else was listening to that, but that felt like an excerpt from like a documentary. Like, I don't mean to be weird, but like I like really enjoyed listening to you say that.
I want to hear bad news from her.
Hold on one second, guys.
You know,
so emotion. I'll tell you this.
I love you, Steve.
I think trauma, emotions. Now, not just think. What if that plays into some of the phenomenon interacting with us? What if they're curious about how these monkeys?
Without a doubt, I have to say, I've experienced this. We are being driven. We have got a conscious energy that is amongst beings in this universe that can't come and show themselves all in one go because we're not ready for it. We would fight them. But what they're doing is they're trying to help us. So they jump into they're part of our subconsciousness. They're giving us clues, and they have been since the beginning of time. Whoever wrote that Bible was so intelligent, way more intelligent than us. And if you start to look at it and piece together all the parts of the puzzle, it's easy to see that this is a greater intelligence that's been evolving over 100 million years or more. Imagine how advanced that is. Thank you.
I couldn't get the mic button. I'm sorry, guys. I couldn't touch the mic button. I kept hitting it. I'm like, oh my God, are you serious? And it wouldn't turn on. So sorry about that. What I was trying to post before I stepped on the Tom right here now was you were making some comments. It sounded a lot too like a paper that I'm going to post. It's called The One Human Connection, right? Essentially, the whole hive mind thing, that's where we're headed. That collective consciousness, that whatever this God is we perceive as, that's what this talks about. And it talks about it's the one human problem and the solutions is kind of what it is. So if you want, have a read to it, check it out. Because this is stuff that, while it is in detail, and some of it's look over my pay grade, over my head on some of it. I do have a basic understanding of it, and it sounds a lot like some of the stuff we talk about, right? We may not be there yet, but I think that's where we're going, hive mind type stuff. Go ahead, buddy.
Hey guys, love you. It's such a cool conversation, and I really enjoy it. I think that there's some really cool about having these abilities. I did a viewing of this Las Vegas UFO and aliens case, and I was stunned to find out it was real, and there was a new effect I hadn't seen before. You know, there's a lot of different ways to camouflage a craft, but they were doing something that I was calling a stem smearing. It sounds fucking silly, but it makes a lot of sense. Stem is space-time, energy, and matter, and as a being gets more and more advanced, they will be able to manipulate themselves and stem in more and more dynamic ways, as we have over time. Even a singular species will improve in their ability to interact with STEM in more and more dynamic ways. And you could imagine a more advanced civilization having such a mastery of STEM that they could almost like a mixer board do quite a few different interesting things. Let's go with smearing. In order to make themselves and what they're doing and what's around them in non-visible, they could not violate conservation laws by spreading themselves equally over backwards and forwards in time. And it's a little bit of a trick. So when you like try to isolate them, you're just isolating that piece of them in that time space-time slice. So there'd be all sorts of weird effects visually. Because they're smeared, you would see that direction that you're looking over a period of time, including the time they were there and when they're not there. So it's going to mollify visual things. Things will go, they'll have be all sorts of different types of visual effects, from blurriness to even weird colors or dulling of colors. The same thing would be happening with sounds. It'd be very weird types of sounds. You could get all the sounds from the whole smear, and and I'm not talking about the schmear. That's on a bagel. That's different. They could, when you look at the whole period of the time smear, they could their movements and sounds that they make could appear differently to someone who's relativistically seeing it from a different slice in a different space-time rate. So they could hear bizarre things. They might hear ultra low frequency, fast verbalizations when it was, in actuality, very slow and deeper, sounds. They could hear a bunch of sounds all at one portion, a bunch of sounds from the entire smear, only in one little section, and then keep it hidden from the rest of that section. So there's all these bizarre, really cool effects that were coming out of this, and these two beings, and that the smaller one could do stuff with his mind like that, could use his consciousness to connect to the structure. Like, everyone knows that advanced craft and ESP has had this wacky connection, because I think the aerospace engineers are some of the smartest ones, and they knew it was representative of some field that we're just barely understanding. And this smearing thing, I thought, wow, that's a super advanced technology. It could explain things like walking through walls and things like that. In order to hit them, or to see them even, you'd have to do something like an ultraviolet floodlight, which has a lot higher frequency and higher fidelity of photonic reflections back to you. So something that might be time smeared would look blurry to someone else, but if you hit them with a floodlight, it might give you a little bit more of the detail from a certain percentage of the time slice, because it's such a higher fidelity, higher frequency mode of getting data back, if that makes sense. But another thing you could also do, there's all these things I figured out you could do if these kind of this kind of technology's around you. Maybe I should stop and let other people go for a while, and then I can come back. It's just blown me away. I've got 5 little mini short videos on my channel about this whole thing. It's been so weird and cool, and I really loved it. And wanted to know what you guys thought about that sphere thing. I've never thought of that before in my life, never heard of it before, but it just came out in this viewing. Actually, I've kind of heard of little kind of pieces, but it all came together and seemed so logical. I was like, wow, that's weird. Where did that come from?
We love you, buddy.
C.
Love you guys.
Obviously, we love you. Go ahead, C.
Yeah, just some more thoughts. The objective of our creation, of any creation, is to stand the test of time and to survive. And I think we've all appreciated, we call it God. It doesn't matter what we call it, it's God. But it's an energy, and energy cannot disappear. It just changes form. We don't lose it. If you think about, actually the Bible says, it makes it very clear that way, way back when, species lived for 930 years. Our closest relative in terms of DNA lives for 35 years, and we're lucky to get 80 right now. And then when you consider that scientists, biologists, they don't really know what 80% of the brain does. We know the 20% that controls our body, our thinking, etc., but we don't know what the 80% does. I would suggest it's a storage unit, and that storage unit is waiting for us to fill it up with that collective wisdom. And once we've got that, our bodies can evolve to surpass that 930 years. It's promised in the Bible that we will have eternal bodies. It's down to us to create that, and we can only do it by combining as one team.
Thank you for that. And you know what, guys? Everything she said, the Bible, these things like that, right? We just got to remember, where do you think they were taken from? And I keep going back to the Akashic record. I think we're all fighting, arguing over the same fucking thing, killing each other over the same thing that we perceive differently, because perception, that's part of it. And I'm going to leave with this. We're going to end the space after this. I'm going to do more spaces. I'm going to figure out my shit, right? I'm going to be traveling, and so reach out to me. I had some, and we'll connect. You can tell your story, whatever. But my point is this: how do I explain things? And I'll give you guys a bit of information. So one of the things that happened to me along the way is we found a source that was read into the program, right? And he was an older source of back in the day. And one of the pieces of information we got was how these craft were driven by the Greys. A molded device is what we'll start with. It wasn't until later on, right, that through getting other sources and kind of winding through all this, right, I find out what this molded device is. So picture a softball-sized, shiny-ass aluminum ball that you could put your hand on, right? And when I saw this, I kept thinking to myself, wait, what is it about this that this has to do something with energy? And I couldn't figure out what it is about focus and energy, because I was still on that whole mirror, Kozlov mirrors thing, right? Like the ability to time travel, because if you can access this third rail, this Akashic record that we could hack, and if we could hack it, you're able to do these things. You could, if you're far advanced, you could throw it into your tools and shit, right? So you could speed up your travel, go through time, do whatever you wanted to do. And I couldn't figure out.
Did you say something about a ball?
Yeah. So
ball? I'm gonna
yeah, basically so the Greys drove. When I say we had shitty EM drive craft, the United States government, what I meant is we put steering wheels in that shit. They drove with their consciousness. And what they did is they put their hands on softball-sized, almost luminous shine shit, right? And all I could think is, what's that got to do with the energy in the Akashic record? And I kept thinking, and I couldn't place it, right? And after I was shown this thing, right? And it was in my head, like, I know this is something. What am I looking for? Right on I turn on YouTube, and I don't watch TV. I don't really watch YouTube a lot, just witness videos. And there it is, some channel I never watched. And all I see is a half of one of those balls. It's cut in half. And he's showing you how if you pull your finger in here, it can focus the light and it shows you a hologram. And all of a sudden it hit me what I was missing. So I take that shit and I take it to my source. I'm like, nah, blah, 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 blah. And then I get, hey, where the hell did you get that? And then he sends me back, same thing, but a different video explaining it better. How do you explain shit like that? I can't. Doesn't, I know it may make sense to others, but when it's a constant thing over and over, man, I just feel like I'm seeing something or something's interacting with me. I don't understand. And I don't know if I'm being fucked with, being CI'd, or if I'm being, maybe it's salvation. That's why I keep saying lower G God. What's up, C?
Yeah, I know you've got to go. I spoke to a physicist in Korea. I didn't speak to him. He actually sent me a whiteboard presentation because I was trying to work this out. If we're going to have an end times, it's got to be time and space. And I was sat for weeks trying to work out date lines. He contacted me and he showed me his theory, when the light know, you know. And it was absolutely amazing. It used the relativity of light to describe it. And he showed me, and I absolutely trust him implicitly, that the other half of our family, 48,000 species, are 1 meter per second ahead of us. And we, when we open up that WAN, that part of our brain, that collective consciousness, we'll be able to travel anywhere back in time. And when our bodies have become what they need to be, we'll be able to do it holographically, go anywhere. But the future, we can't travel into the future. They're 1 meter per second ahead of us. But the future is building our dreams. Thank you, and have a great trip.
Yeah, and that's a hell of a mic drop to end this on, so let's do that. Hey, guys, thank you for being here. Retweet the space. Follow all the speakers, co-hosts, anyone that interacts in these spaces. Whenever I'm hurting, I need to talk, work shit through, this is where I come. Feels like home, and I don't know if it's sad or it's good, but my only people that I literally can talk about this stuff with and families, you guys, so I appreciate that. These rooms are probably more for me than you. I'm only here because of you, and it sounds stupid, but you wouldn't believe how much. For a man to owe people he doesn't know and may never meet his life, I don't know if that sucks or if that's how good the human race can be, because you guys are fucking amazing. That's all I got to say. So thank you guys. Have a great time. Retweet.
Utterly beautiful to be able to talk without being judged and condemned, don't you think?
I agree. Trust me. It's not everywhere you get this, guys. Remember that.
We love you, brother.
All right. Love you guys. Take care. Have a great one. Great 4th.